Brett Trembly. Welcome to the ROI Online Podcast.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me.
I was looking forward to this conversation. Of course, everybody that's listening right now, they're wondering why they need to be interested in this conversation. And so I'm telling you, Brett's coming with some really cool stuff. He's got a company called getstaffedup.com. He's has a law firm, a successful law firm in Miami. He's got a book coming out soon called The Danger Zone. And we're going to have an excellent conversation. Brett, tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah. So, Steve, when I found out you're from Amarillo, that was exciting to me. And now that I'm on the East Coast, anytime I get to meet somebody from back in the Southwest, it's nice. I grew up just outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and when I meet people out here in Miami, the response that I used to get was, "Oh wow, I've never met anyone from New Mexico before." It's like one of those states that you skip over. In your mind, you know where California is, you know where Texas is. Of course, everyone has heard of Colorado and Arizona, but New Mexico, we just, I guess we have that inferiority complex for that reason as well. So, but now when I meet people, they say, "Oh yeah, Breaking Bad. I love that show." And so, for better or worse, Breaking Bad put us on the map. So grew up in New Mexico. I went to college there. I went 5 years. So my fifth year at Eastern New Mexico University, I think I had 3 or 6 hours a semester. It was a victory lap, as they say, I was student body president, and I was just having a grand old time. And 5 years wasn't enough. So I decided I wanted to still delay adulthood and go to more school. And I settled on law school. And once I got into Miami, that was a no-brainer for me. I wanted to see something different, something new. And I remember, Steve, driving onto campus. So I moved out here and started law school without ever visiting Miami or been to Miami. It was one of those things like, what am I not going to like,
Right.
So it was either that or go back to University of New Mexico for law school. And so I drove across the country with my old man in my Jeep Grand Cherokee, loaded to the top. I pulled up, I drove onto campus, and it just one of those moments, it hit me. I just said, I'm not leaving. And I loved it, from day one, the trees, the water, there's more water in one view of your eyes when you're on the beach than there is in the entire state of New Mexico, of course. And, there's just a lot going on here. It's international. It's very cultural. And, I don't know, there's good things and bad things about every city. I certainly like visiting back home. But for now, this is where I make a living. So I've, got married. I have 3 kids now and several businesses. And because of the coronavirus, I'm working from home more than ever. And that parlays nicely into what we're doing. It gets staffed up.
So Mr. New Mexico arrives in big time Miami, and you're beginning law school. What are you learning about yourself at this time?
I'm learning that I really enjoy being on my own and alone, if that makes sense. But I'm definitely not it's kind of become trendy to call yourself an introvert, but introvert and extrovert has to do with where you get your energy. And I love leading groups. I love being, I was always captain of whatever I was doing, and I love the team and the mission and the rallying. And I love building teams, in business now. There's just a lot of similarities. But at the same time, I really recharge and enjoy my alone time and my thinking time. And I think being out here, not knowing anybody, I moved out in 2005, and within a month and a half, we had hurricanes Katrina, Rita, and Wilma.
Wow.
And Katrina hit only a few weeks. And look, I'm starting to meet people the first week. I was living in the fraternity house on campus because it's a private school. A lot of people don't know that about the University of Miami. They have live-in sort of house dads in the fraternity houses. And I was doing that on scholarship during law school. And, so I knew people, but it was so brand new. my first hurricane, I ended up in a suite on campus with a friend, and then I remember my first Thanksgiving. I didn't want to ask anyone to go to Thanksgiving with them, and it wasn't enough time to fly home. So I still joke that I had SpaghettiOs, by myself, and I enjoyed it. I never looked at it like, poor me. I don't have all my network here, and I took that. So a lot of people, it's like, well, how did you come into Miami without family, friends? There's a lot of private schools here, so if you go to high school, you have really good business networks at a lot of the private schools out here, colleges, and I had none of that. And people ask, well, how did you build your business? You're basically just came into Miami and here you are. And I don't know. I just never looked at it as an impediment. I never let it get in my way. I just kind of do my thing. I've never really focused on obstacles. And I guess from the outside, now that I have kids, I see a lot of the things that I did when I was younger, and I think, oh wow, I could see how my parents would react to that now. But when you're just going through things, Steve, I'm just not the type of guy who's very good at stopping and saying, oh wow, that was a good accomplishment or a big accomplishment, or wow, look what I'm doing. I just keep going day to day.
So it's interesting because you go on, you start a law firm and you build out a law firm, but here you're independent, you're thinking that you're more of an introvert, or you're saying that you are, and yet you build an excellent team. Where does that come from?
So I love leadership. I love being in charge of a mission. I hate using the analogy of like wartime and stuff, because God forbid, we nothing that we do is even close to what goes on in the real, combat and military. But I guess the analogy is there's peacetime generals and wartime generals, and I've always liked the fight, the mission. Let's build something. Let's attack. Let's focus on. We wanted to become different in Miami in terms of how legal services were delivered, and we were going to show people that we could be different. So those things get me excited. I love the missions. And then if you have core values and you have a mission and you focus on them, and you make them a part of your business, where you hire and train and retain or fire based on your core values, you start to get people around you that are excited to be on the same boat, and they want to row with you. There's very few things more frustrating than having employees constantly fighting against the current and pushing back. And you and I, had a little bit of this discussion about hiring and people, then, oh, millennials this and kids that, and it's always everyone else's fault except the leader. Nobody I've met says, I suck at hiring, I suck at leading, I'm terrible, I need help. Or I should say, very few people. I have heard a few people say that. And as Tony Robbins said, there's no such thing as a bad team, only a bad leader. Because the leader's the one hiring, and the leader's the one rowing and building. So you're making the decisions as the leader. You have to look at yourself if things aren't going right and figure out why. And if you have bad employees, then why did you keep them? And if you don't want bad employees next time, put more effort into the recruiting and hiring process, and become the type of business that's going to attract the people that you want to work with and around. And if someone doesn't fit in your culture, you need to let them go, because it's respectful for them and for you, so they can go find their culture. And I looked on your website, Steve, nobody's wearing suits and ties. You've got a very fun, casual bunch. And that's going to attract more of the people that like that are going to resonate with ROI Online. And so, go ahead.
No, I'm wondering if you always found yourself in a position of class president or leader of, as you were growing, is that innately in you, or where did you learn it? Did you have a mentor? Did you have someone that really exemplified leadership to you? Where does that come from?
That I have pondered before, and I think it's a little bit of both. I'm naturally, I've got the red hair gene, so I'm naturally kind of fiery. I wish I was more even keeled, but I can have a temper and get very excited at times. I was very competitive. I think some of it comes from, sibling rivalry and having an older brother who was good at sports that I had to live up to. Um, Part of it comes from I was shorter growing up. I didn't hit my growth spurt until like seventh or eighth grade. So and but that I think that's so there's nature and nurture there. But the big thing for me is my father every summer would take a week out of his schedule and be a camp counselor at something called Rotary Youth Leadership Awards in New Mexico and Southwest Texas. Every summer, they took one boy out of every high school, voluntarily, of course, and put him in a leadership camp. So you had some of the best and the brightest from around the region, and it was a full week where you were in cabins. Each cabin would give themselves a name, and then they would compete on sports, on speaking, on just it was such an incredible week. And because my dad was in Rotary and he liked those things, he started bringing us from when we were kids. So when I was like 5 or 6, I would go for the last weekend and I would be around these amazing older guys. And as a young boy, of course, I looked up to them. That was like, I want to be like these guys. And so I learned, you had to come up with kind of your chance and how to compete as a team. And man, I just ate that stuff up. I just love it. I did that all, and then I started going for the entire week so that they let me stay, and I was basically one of the team, in seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade. And then of course, when I was old enough, I did it myself. And I just think it's a lot of factors.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I do think leadership can be learned. I think anybody can reinvent themselves, and it's pretty cool when you see somebody totally just decide, you know what? I'm going to be this person. Who I know a girl that was like in a dead end job, and she's like, you know what? I'm just going to influence women. I'm going to work from Colorado and Miami. I'm going to split my time. I'm going to be a coach virtually, and I'm going to turn into a thought influencer just out of the blue. And then she did it. And I love that kind of stuff. I think people, life's short. Do what you're called to do. And it doesn't matter what age you are either.
Culture for me it's something that has to be deliberate. And I was trying to figure out a good way to define, an example of what culture is. It's not bean bags and free coffees and those things, but it has something deeper. And I was watching, I think it's Chef on Netflix. There's a series where they interview these big deal chefs, and they go back to their backstory. And in one of the episodes, it really started to sink into me. To create great food, you have to have great ingredients. But these guys went even deeper, and they wanted great soil. So they bought their own farm, and they started to take control of the quality of the ingredients by controlling the quality of the soil. And then it just kind of hit me that a great culture is like great soil for an organization. If you can make that soil healthy and nutritious and clean, then the work and the people that are attracted and grow there is impacted significantly. How do you feel about culture?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good analogy. And you can have the same soil and grow beans, or you can grow corn, or you can grow, I don't know, squash, whatever you want, right? So I think it's to take it a step further. You got to have the great soil or the culture, and then deliberately choose what crop you're going to grow
Mm-hmm.
with the right strategy in place. And that's comes back to then recruiting the type of people that are going to join your mission. So if your passion is to, I don't know, change the environment, and climate change is your big thing, you're probably not going to go work at, let's say, General Motors, right? Like their diesel division. I'm just throwing some things out there. Like that's just not what's going to speak to you. And culture is about being honest. We ask people at the law firm, at my law firm, Trembly Law, we ask people, look, our part of our hiring process, we give a quiz and you have to write what our core values mean to you, because we just tell you what they are, but not how we define them, and our mission. And our mission is to protect the economy one business at a time. And Steve, you and I believe this each together, even though we hadn't met until recently, that business owners are the backbone of our economy. We're the ones providing the jobs, and we're the ones keeping the economy moving. We still employ more than half of the the
American workforce.
private sector in the American workforce. And so if you don't believe in business, and this is not political, this is just economical. Like if you think that everyone should be paying 80% in taxes and businesses are evil, why don't come work with us? I don't want to get into philosophical debate with you, but that's okay. This is not the culture. It's the wrong soil for you. And being very clear on what is the right soil, and then once you sprout, so to speak, what we're going to talk about, and those are our 5 core values, then I think you're going to start to grow the right crop.
So the 5 core values I think are super important. There's a great book I really highly recommend. It's called Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold, but it helps you write the story of your organization 3 years from now. And you think about your challenge as a leader is you need to attract the right people onto your team. And this is very significant. It's a huge competitive lever if you get it right. But how can you take what's in your head and communicate it clearly so that you can attract the people that love it and would thrive in it, or repel the people that would be like not be on board about it? And you have to declare it, and you have to state what you believe. But in that book, there's a great framework to start to identify that and pull it out of your head and get it on paper so that you can actually draw this right picture so that people see the same point on the horizon that you're going to. How did you come up with your 5 core values, and what are they?
Okay, so yeah, let me make this point too. So there's a quote I like that says, "Your business plan is what you are, but your culture is who you are." And a lot of people, well, let's face it, a lot of business owners skip the business plan in general, but the ones that do, they're just focused on, well, I need this in marketing, and this is what this department is going to look like. But what about your vision, and what about the culture part of your firm? So I'm glad you brought up that book, because getting it down in writing and then communicating it is very important. Our 5 core values are on our website, and we remember them with an acronym, which is risky beavers that tickle koalas. It's kind of an inside joke, but we have our t-shirts that have Trembly Law on the front, and then they have a risky beaver that's tickling a koala on the back. It's kind of a symbol for us to just remind us of the core values. So the R for risky is radiate positive energy. That is, to me, the most important core value. I do not like being around negative people. You don't have to be, the class clown and be loud and fake high-fiving everybody, but you got to be a positive person. Negativity is contagious, and so that's no good. And then it's be responsible, be a team player, take action, and the last one is kick ass. And some people say, wow, you have a curse word on your website. And it's like, well, we're a little bit edgy too. That's the kind of client and team members that we want. We want people to know that, look, so we do business law, franchise law, trademarks, and litigation. And so when you have a litigation team, our goal at the firm is to keep business owners out of court. But inevitably, sometimes you're going to end up in disputes that unreasonable people don't work out, and we're going to take no prisoners. And you got to have, be trusting in your team that they're going to go to bat for you. And look, we don't want a stuffy, boring law firm either. So I really like having that core value out there. It's hard to walk the line of professional, but also sort of new and different without going too far with it. Because some people, they want to have the open workspace and the bean bags and ping pong tables and have the kegerator, in the middle and have that be the focus. And you can't have that at a law firm either, in my opinion, if you're going to be a serious law firm, which we are, by the way. We've got 10 attorneys, 25 people. I do have to give it a little bit of credibility because, Get Staffed Up is a very quickly growing business. It's a lot of fun, but some people get the shiny object syndrome and they're not successful with their business. So now they start a bunch of other ones. And, I just want to throw that out there, that this is not just a distract me side project. This is real, and it comes from a good place.
So where did this culture mission really show itself? Was it at the beginning of your business, or did you learn your lesson several years
Yeah.
into it?
Yeah. So yes, you asked me how. Definitely learned this several years into it. So we have there's a system called Traction. It's the entrepreneurial organizational system. It's
Operating
really
system, yeah.
Yeah, operating system. It's really, I love it. It's sweeping the nation. Tried to do it myself for a year. That went horribly. I implemented it at the firm, and what we did, the first retreat we had was we sat down and we just threw out all of the words that we thought described us and who we wanted to be. I mean, this is like a 2 or 3 hour process, right? Like separate, go think for a while, and then explain why. And then we slowly started bringing those into, we got rid of some of them, and then we voted, and then we talked them through, and we voted on more. And we eventually got down to the 10, and then to the 7, and to the 5. And then we had them. And then we had, with the whole team, we had an acronym contest or a mnemonic phrase contest. So everybody got to come in with how they wanted to, and name it. And that's how we came up with the Risky Beavers mnemonic phrase. That's all for the law firm. So with Get Staffed Up, we took all these lessons and we implemented them from day one.
Yeah.
Get Staffed Up has been running on Traction from day one. We've had our core values since day one, and we do the same thing because Get Staffed Up recruits. We've got hundreds of people now working for us in Latin America, and during the interview process, it's the same thing. We're asking about our core values and what makes you incredible. And it's I don't want to beat a dead horse too much, but you could say most of our core culture relies on the core values, and it's worked out for us very well.
I think that's a good horse to beat for a long time, that culture thing. I think it's something that every employee innately desires and craves, and yet they're often disappointed and they wonder why they're not happy at work, and there's this wrestling match. I call it a stupid tax. If you don't have these in place, it's a invisible tax that destroys morale over a long period of time. Because you think about the new people that come to work for you, they don't show up saying, I'm really going to suck at this job and I'm just going to ride this as long as I can until I get found out, and then I'll just look for another one. They don't do that. At least I don't believe the majority of them do. I think most of them show up thinking like, I'm going to make the most of this opportunity. I want to be a good employee. I want to contribute. And so they come in and they run into these little rules that don't make sense or are just stupid. And it'll cross their mind. Well, that's a stupid rule. Then they'll go, oh, but I want to be a good employee. So I'm going to put that aside. But over time, those rules or those processes or those things that don't make sense will diminish their enthusiasm and commitment to the organization over time. And they couldn't sit down and go, well, it all began with this first stupid rule I ran into. And I truly believe that focusing on your culture, getting these things right, is like a huge competitive advantage to success. Just to make a business last for years, That's hard enough. But if you can get this in place, you just reduced a lot of friction and hurdles.
Yeah, and your team will know when you're full of it, because when you don't enforce your core values, then they think, well, that was just a bunch of baloney, this hiring and onboarding process, because this guy that I'm working for or under, or this girl doesn't, she laughs at our core values and she doesn't live up to them. Why is she still here? And I've had employees tell me that they appreciate how fast we fire people,
Hmm.
because and I, the other thing is, when you fire someone, it's not like they're a bad person. You're right, they're wrong. It doesn't have to be an ego thing. It's just, you need to move on from people that don't fit or that aren't getting the job done, because there's a place out there for everybody to find a home.
So what I'm hearing in a lot of your vocabulary and conversation here is that this became something very important to you. And I think that you recognize many entrepreneurs wrestle with getting this clear and finding good people for their business and beginning to delegate or beginning to do the things. Talk about your example that where when you started your law firm, how you were trying to do everything and you finally came to a realization.
So my first 2.5 years were a big struggle. I wasn't happy at the law firm that I worked at directly out of law school. I appreciated the opportunity, but I was just felt like I was in a rut, and I had always known that I would be in charge. I always knew that I would own my own business someday. I mean, I had candy machine routes, and I always came up with ways to make money as a kid. That was the other part of my personality. I was always looking for ways to do things and do them myself. And so when I started my law firm and then I started networking, I was like, this is going to be easy and this is going to be great because I'm so wonderful. Now, I didn't say I'm so wonderful. That was part of my ego that I hadn't explored and didn't realize. And that can serve you well for confidence, but it can hurt you, because then you think you have all the answers, you're not going to seek help, and you can do everything yourself. And I was so afraid of hiring someone to help, because I thought if I had to fire them, that everybody would say I'm a failure and the whole world would laugh at me, as if people have the time to sit around and think about me all day. But that's the fear of failure was what was holding me back. And this is my anniversaries. Well, we're filming this, almost on my anniversary, which is 11/1/11 when I started. So I got 9 years coming up here in a few days. And this is 2011. So for the first 2.5 years, I was licking my own stamps, answering my own phones, sending my own faxes, because it was 2011. And I was barely getting to any legal work, which is the only way that I could make income from my law firm. So I finally had an epiphany. I had a coach at this point that finally just like kicked me so hard, made me do it. I hired someone for 30 hours a week, a law student. She's now a lawyer. Very happy for her. When we talk, we always make this joke. She was my first employee. And I doubled the revenue of the business that very next month. And it's like, wow, oh my gosh, that's incredible. Well, if you do the math and you're billing 1 hour a day, and now you do two, that's times two. I mean, right? It's really not rocket science, but I will give myself credit for the fact that I took the lesson and I absorbed it, and I believed in it. And a lot of people have success and then they say, oh, that was a fluke. That won't happen again. I'm not going to hire anymore because woof, I am so relieved. I didn't go out of business. I made it. And you see a lot in the legal world, especially, because Get Staffed Up, our virtual staff, we focus on staffing for law firms. That's our marketing focus. We have a lot of non-law firm clients, but niches bring riches, and it's just so hard to market to a bunch of different markets. So I use the lawyer example. It's like one guy and his one paralegal who's really just doing everything, and that's his office for 40 years. They never take the They don't do a Goldman Sachs 10,000 small businesses program. They don't read books. They don't take risks. And I think most of them, if they say, but I'm happy like this, I'm comfortable like this, they're probably lying to themselves, because they're just like I was. And I'm not condemning, because this was me, so afraid of the risk and the fear of failure and the overhead. And look, the overhead is real. But yeah, I mean, I think that I learned the lesson, and then I just started hiring, and I made a plan to continue to hire. And there's a good book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Because before I had the core values and the culture in place, and it was just kind of me and running off my personality. I hired people, and then it worked, and we kept growing the firm. But those same people are not with me now. And it's okay. It's okay to hire and then have to fire. People are so hard on themselves when they hire someone and they train and it doesn't work out. Well, I wasted all that time and I wasted the money, and I don't want to do that again. There's a few other options, but you're gonna have to make the decision that it's part of it. Turnover is just part of it.
Yeah. And the other side of that coin is if you have the expectation that the person you hire is going to be with you for 9 years or 10 years or however long, that's not a realistic expectation as well. They have lives, they have transitions, they get married, they have kids,
Yeah.
who knows? And it's okay for them to
Mhm.
go on and do other things with their life instead of just be in that chair every day and gung ho about your company. That's
Yep.
just natural.
Yep. Life happens.
Yeah. So Get Staffed Up came from this thing that you really recognize that's important to you.
Kind of. So I had the idea in 2017 of starting a company called the Hiring Pros and helping people learn how to hire. Totally unrelated, but about the same time, my now business partner had lunch with somebody that he almost skipped out on. That's kind of his funny story. Learned that this lawyer had a staff person in the Philippines, and then my business partner disappeared for a few months, kind of went into a rabbit hole. And when he resurfaced, because I used to talk to him almost every day, and I didn't even see him for 2 months, when we could still see people in person. So, and he sort of resurfaced with 5 new employees, and I couldn't believe it, and I certainly couldn't believe what he was paying them compared to the traditional payroll that we have here in the States for administrative level positions. And I said, I need somebody. Can you find me a marketing assistant? And he did. And he wanted to do kind of consulting, and he was going to help people learn how to do this, and they would pay him a flat fee. And I said, well, you could also turn this into a real business where you're the employer, and we just kind of went from there. And early 2018, January 28th, I think, we said, you know what, let's do this together. I made the first 2 sales for his company, and he said, let's do this together. And that's how Get Staffed Up was born.
So what's the big deal about Get Staffed Up compared to other outsourcing options? I mean, there's a lot of those. And yeah, there's a lot of those. So first help me understand the value of Get
Mm-hmm.
Staffed Up compared to others.
There are 2 main differences, in sort of 2 genres. There are the United States based outsourcing companies where you can hire somebody for rather expensively, we'll say like $35-$45 an hour to be a quasi executive assistant. And then your decision is, how much do I want to pay them through a company? How many hours per week do I need? Right. So I need 5 hours per week. So then, I'm going to give them projects that's going to take up about 5 hours per week. Totally different. Not at all what we do. And then there's the overseas, which is what we do. But most of the outsourcing companies are the same thing. They're playing time Tetris. So you're signing up with a company, and they're asking you, well, how much time do you think you need per week of an assistant? And you're like, well, I only need 10 hours and I only need 15 hours. So they've got a building in the Philippines. They pack it like sardines. You got a bunch of people in cubicles right next to each other. and you're going to maybe get somebody different, often there's going to be a rotation, or you're really selling yourself short by only getting somebody that's going to be able to do projects for you. They're certainly not going to be a team member or an employee. So what we do at Get Staffed Up, Steve, is we recruit 95% of our people are out of Latin America. You're talking Mexico, Central America, and South America. And we are placing full-time team members with you. Of course, they're virtual because they're not in the office with you. Full-time only. We only do 40 hours per week. That person is now a part of your culture and your team. They work for you and for you only. They just happen to be legally employed by us. So Get Staffed Up does the recruiting and the placing. And I could talk more about the placing because we don't just tell you who you get. You ultimately get to decide who you hire. You pay us a flat fee every month as a contractor. So there's no additional taxes or fees. And we handle the withholding, the taxes, the benefits, and the compliance, which is different in all those countries, it gets pretty difficult. And we have our client happiness team that stays on as a liaison to make sure that things are going well. Life does happen, these are still human beings. So sometimes there's turnover and people quit and they leave, and we replace them for you. We just go right back to the well and go and recruit someone else. So you're getting a new team member who only works for you for 40 hours a week for the whopping price of $18.50 a month.
So before we go deeper, I think one of the things that you helped me have more clarity on, all these businesses like mine, we're having to figure out how to recruit good team members to deliver on the demand that we've created. And so we have to discern the level of team member that we want to share in the burden. So yeah, I think the thing you helped me have clarity on was like, there's a executive level, then there's strategic level maybe, and maybe that's the executive, they're bringing more strategy and more business acumen. Then the next level would be more tactical, where they show up and they're excellent at stepping into a well-defined system and following your system. Talk more about that. I think that's a real important thing for someone that might be considering outsourcing. If they could start to have the proper expectations, I think they're more set up for success to find a better fit faster.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for asking that. For example, we had somebody that was a friend. They're like, "Oh, this sounds so great. I can't wait to work with you guys because I just want to hand over all my marketing and never think about it." It's like, okay, I guess we're not in alignment here, because first of all, that rarely exists in the whole world. Second of all, that's certainly not what we do. Some magician that's going to pull all your vision and ideas out of your head and just bring them to life.
I'm sorry, but the last chapter of the second to last chapter of my book talks about that exact conversation right there.
Yeah.
And they're looking for, we call her Kelly, but her long name is Miracle. And so she doesn't exist, or he doesn't exist. Yeah.
I like that. I like that name. So yeah, that just doesn't exist. So what we do is we're finding virtual assistants, but again, we use VA because people know that term, but these are they're basically your employee, just not legally, and they're not project based either. But they are assistants. They are not going to be your CFOs, your CEOs, your COOs. They're not going to come in and take over all your marketing. If you have, let's say you're starting a social media company here in the US, you're going to get client accounts. Maybe you're going to sign people up for, you're going to go to Mr. Business Owner for $1,500 a month. We'll do all your social media, and we'll do, 3 newsletters for you a month, and we'll write 3 blogs. That's a very common scenario. Okay. So that's not project-based work. That's monthly ongoing work. For me, I'm thinking, okay, if I can set up a system that gets the info I need from that business owner. What would you like to talk about this month or focus on? I can put that into a spreadsheet, and somebody can pull out of that and do all that work for me on the back end that I just have to approve. Okay. That's an assistant. That's a worker bee, someone who, needs to have some brain cells and is good, but they're not doing the creative thinking or the vision. I'm thinking to myself, well, let's say I found someone like through Get Staffed Up for $18.50 a month. On my second sale, I'm already profitable, and I'm just going to go out and grow the company and see what kind of bandwidth one assistant can do. Maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10. And now I know my SKUs. I know how many clients per assistant that I need to have, and I can scale my company this way. So when you're working with, part-time here and 30 hours there, it's just so difficult if you're serious about growing your business to do it in a very, scientific, mathematical way. And when you design the system yourself, for lawyers, for example, you can have a receptionist who's outsourced. You can have your intake person. You can have a legal assistant, a client happiness coordinator, a personal assistant, an executive assistant, a marketing assistant, and you're still going to need to give them the projects and design the systems and have the weekly team meetings, but then you let them run with all the things you put in place. Systems run the business, but people run the systems. So if you need 10 people on a conveyor belt to get the chocolate made and out the door, we now know, because some of our clients have more than 10 team members through us, that the average that they save in payroll a year is 250,000.
Wow.
Right. And so now that's money in the owner's pocket. And I don't mean that greedy. I mean, like, a lot of small business owners have such small margins that they're owned by their own business and they're miserable. But it also has allowed our clients to grow so fast that they can hire here domestically. We're not arguing that you replace jobs or you fire people. We're saying add bandwidth. If you have, like, all of our lawyers now at the firm, at the partner level, all have executive assistants offshore through Get Staffed Up, because now it's going to add to their capacity. So now you've created a job, you've helped the global economy, you've helped the lawyer be way more efficient, and you've also passed that on to the clients.
Totally. I think that's an excellent way to look at it, is that if your business is contributing to your community, adding value by the services, the things that you're providing, helping people get out of the ditch in the illegal situation, but you can only help one person a month. But all of a sudden now you can help 2, 3, 4, 5. You could be making a big impact in your community instead of buying this excuse that you're not hiring local people necessarily. You're still contributing significantly to the community, and you're going to be hiring local people to some extent where you may have never hired.
Yep, exactly. That's a common scenario that happens with us. We sometimes run in, in fact, some lawyer, I don't think she has much of a staff, wanted to have me on her podcast, and then when she started asking me more about the company, I don't agree with that. Your outsourcing job. I said, okay, look, respectfully, we're not a fit then, and that's okay. But I think that's a short-sighted view of things, because if the whole world becomes connected and people can work from home and actually make a living, maybe we don't have to build walls, right? Maybe everyone doesn't need to run to our country, which provides freedoms and security that other countries don't. Maybe we can help economically make an impact that way. Plus, like we said, you're gonna grow way faster, where you can start hiring people that domestically that you otherwise would have been afraid to hire. Or now, post COVID, maybe someone in a different part of the US, maybe it's still remote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way I look at it is I have a core team that adds the ROI-ness onto all of our work. They're they're inculcated into our culture. They love our clients. They want to protect and empower entrepreneurs. So, but they bring a unique value, strategic value onto the work. So if you think of a NASCAR, you've got a pit crew, you've got the driver, and they can order a carburetor from a manufacturer. But when that carburetor comes in, they don't just put it in there and then go get them. They've tuned that thing. They add all sorts of other value onto that. And that's exactly what's happening in this situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, here's the analogy that I use most often. Um, it's because one of our trademark phrases that we believe into our core. Sorry, we're gonna have to pause. I'm on a podcast being recorded. Yeah, that's okay. Okay. All right, hold on. All right, you tell me where to pick up.
Yeah, so we were talking about the NASCAR analogy. Hey, by the way, this happens all the time. One of the episodes I had, one of the kids comes in, they're supposed to ask before they eat anything with sugar, so that we had to get permission if a lollipop was okay. This is just the way things are. I've had chickens crowing, I've had
Yeah.
cats walk through. It's cool.
Yeah, no, I know. I normally have a sign up that says, Daddy's recording, but it doesn't always work. Although that was my wife. So okay. So look, there's a trademark phrase that we have. It's called "delegate your way to freedom," because I always go back to who I was in 2011, 12, 13, and 14 when I started my business, and I was so afraid to hire. Some people think they have to do it all themselves because it serves their ego. And again, I'm just talking about the ego as something that's like subconscious, separate from us, not about like, I think I'm so great. But it does serve some people's ego to say, I can't give the legal work to someone because they won't do it as well as I will, as if nobody else can possibly be as good as you. Well, that's just not true. But other people are just afraid of the cost, and they're afraid of the time that it would take to train people. And look, those are two realities that I think we're helping people overcome. But it's better to at least take the risk, right? Where would you rather eat, Steve? Except for maybe a few instances where you could think of one guy who has a restaurant and it's like really small but amazing food. Okay, would you rather eat at a restaurant where the owner is the host or the hostess, right? The waitress, she's the line cook, she's the head chef, she's the chief marketer, she's the owner, and she's doing everything herself. I mean, something is going to suffer. It's either going to be the food or the service, or she's going to be serving one table per night, which is, what we're talking about. You can, if you're only helping one client per month. Or would you rather eat at the restaurant where the owner says, I am not the best chef in the world. I'm going to go hire the best possible chef. And then I'm going to hire the nicest host and hostess and the best wait staff. And I'm going to train them. And they're all going to say the same things because they're going to live by the same, values, the core values that we have. And we're going to treat our people better. And that's going to be a differentiator. And we're going to have the best food. I mean, for me, it's a pretty clear answer. And too many business owners don't even stop to think about that. That's what they're doing in their business, is everything themselves. And how just, man, if I could convince people it's possible, just think about it. Start reading books, start putting things on paper, and at the least write down everything you do for a week, highlight your 20 least favorite things, and then just get rid of them. Just delegate them, start somewhere.
Yeah, I like that analogy because you think I've been to that restaurant where it was a special, unique experience, but there were idiosyncrasies, that added to the thing. So you had to be okay that the service was slow, right? Or you had to be okay with some aspect that was you prepared your person you took with you. Now, don't expect this, but the food's going to be amazing, or the view's going to be great. Okay, that's good. But it takes a certain amount of business acumen to go to the next level and design the systems and hire the people who are going to run those systems. That's exactly what you're talking about. That's why managers are so valuable. That's why businesses can make a lot of money, because it's not easy. It takes a significant amount of planning and thinking and commitment and acumen and systems design and pricing. It takes a whole nother level of expertise in running a business. So why would you resent someone that figured that out, that
Right.
created jobs, that risked all this? There's
Mhm.
no guarantee. And just like the situation we're finding then, never imagine that your local government would come in and say, you have to shut down to save the world. That's not fair. But they stepped up knowing that whatever challenge they were going to run into, they were had enough to figure it out in some way.
Yeah.
That, that's why I love these people.
No, exactly. That's exactly right. Putting their reputation, their future on the line by taking risks. And that's the real differentiator there. But it's not just the risk to start the business, Steve, and I'm glad you made that point, because to start a law firm now, it's so easy. If you have a law degree, of course, you need a laptop. That's all you need.
Hmm.
And it's not starting a business anymore so much that impresses me. It's the risks after that to grow a business.
Yeah.
Starting a business is easy. You just say, "Hey, I just started a business." It's growing a business that is not innate, and there's so many steps along the way that people see the overnight success. It takes 10 years because there's so many moves that somebody's making. It's investing into their business to grow it, and it is kind of easy to get complacent, to be comfortable. Comfort is the enemy of progress, in my opinion. And all due respect to those people that are out there pushing the envelope and taking the risks.
So if I'm listening to this and I have this business and I've been kind of wrestling with this delegation challenge, it's kind of cool to know that there's a company that gets that and will help me to make sure I have, ask me about what systems I have in place, will help me get set up for success when I bring someone on board to delegate as an assistant. That I think that's good. I think that's something that needs a lot of clarity because we've all done something and said, well, that didn't work, but we were oblivious to what needed to be in place to increase the chance of success with that implementation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How can they get a hold of you? Where should they learn more?
The fastest and easiest way is online. It's, of course, www.getstaffedup.com. But if you go to getstaffedup.com/VIP, it takes you directly to a contact us page. I think it asks for first name, last name, email, phone number, and where you heard about us. And I do want to have an offer for your listeners, Steve, is
Thank you.
for anyone that goes to getstaffedup.com/VIP, in the where did you hear about us, if you type in Steve Brown, ROI Online, ROI Podcast, we will give that person a $250 discount just because they came through you. Just kind
Wow,
of a nice thing to do for your listeners.
that's awesome. I really appreciate that. The folks that listen to this, they get a lot of value, and that's really cool that you're offering that. So, what's the one question that I didn't ask that you would wished I would have that you could have answered?
Um, we didn't really get into the cost savings, right? And I
Mhm.
think that hammering home that point, because I was the guy that I was so afraid to hire someone. Like, where am I going to come up with I don't know, $500 a week to hire somebody? And when you hire a marketing assistant in-house, and where you live in the country, obviously the cost varies. Okay, but let's say $45,000 for a marketing assistant. Well, when you're in the US, remember you've got a lot of other things that are hidden. So it's about 1.35 times what you pay someone in salary or what it actually costs you and your business. So now you're talking over 50, approaching 55. And that's on the low end, for somebody that can handle some marketing stuff in-house for you. Um, when you go through a company like us, it's 18, well, for marketing, it's just over 2,000 a month, but for your admin positions, it's 1850 a month. So you're talking more like 20,000. And what I tell people, Steve, is business owners normally have 100 new ideas before they're done, with their morning routine, or, before they're out of the shower. And those business ideas end up being metaphorically like pieces of paper stacked up on a desk that you never get to.
Mm.
When you're paying somebody, because this happened to me, pretty significant salary, and you can't identify the return, it's not a good business move. And then it's constantly grinding at you, and you want that person to work faster and get more done. You want to see the results. So when you have someone that you can just give stuff to, man, get an administrative executive assistant, or jump for the marketing assistant. The difference is kind of the education and the background. And just to reiterate, we are hiring talented people, but this is raw talent, and I know you do some cool things with your academies, and certainly you can hire someone like this and put them through an academy, because we don't do any of the training. We do the finding.
Mm-hmm.
And you have somebody that you can delegate all these things to and try out. It is such a weight lifted off your shoulders. Because I don't know about you, but when I have these ideas and I never get to them, it starts to like wear on me. And I'm like, man, I need time. I need to find time. And when you talk about delegate your way to freedom, when you have the ability to just everything that comes your way, or 90%, you just, hey, get this done. Looking at this, respond to this person. It is so empowering, because now you get to focus your time on what you want to do, the highest and best use of your time, and what is going to have the highest return. And that is true freedom, in my opinion, getting to spend your time how you choose.
All right, that's excellent. Delegate your way to freedom. What's the other good quote? Oh, systems run the business, people run the systems. Those are some excellent little what we call golden nuggets. Brett, you've been a really excellent guest, and I appreciate you for being on the ROI Online Podcast.
Well, Steve, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm glad that we were put in touch.
All right, that's a wrap.